Welcome to the Murali End. I'm Dominic Machado, and today I'm joined by Estelle Vasudevan, everyone's favorite Sri Lankan sports journalist. And it also happens to be a birthday here today, so drop in the comments and wish Estelle a happy birthday. We are recording about, I would say, 12 hours maybe after Sri Lanka has won the first test against New Zealand. This is obviously a momentous victory. They're stringing two test victories together, and they've now shot up to third in the ICC World Test Championship. So Mark's dream of a match in London next summer, which we are not allowed to name on the podcast, remains alive. Before we dive into the discussion, just a reminder to like, comment, subscribe on whatever platform you're watching on. And also, if you're looking for a mortgage, be in touch with Mike Ward, whose mortgage company can get you stuff in London, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, I believe. But more details down in the description below. Okay, now that we've kind of got that settled, what we're going to do today is a little bit different. So Estelle and I are going to talk about 5 good things we saw from the match and 5 bad things that we saw from the match. So we're going to start with the good because we won. So Estelle, what was the number one good thing that stood out for you in this match?
Okay, so I'm going to go with the four senior batters getting runs in the second innings. I mean, we were very critical of them when we did that show mid test,
Mhm.
right? And I think that criticism still stands in terms of conversions. But you've got to say those two partnerships, the first one between Dimut and Chandimal, and the second between Angelo and DDS, really set up the game for Sri Lanka. Of course, both partnerships were broken at crucial stages and in kind of disappointing fashion, but
Yeah.
in the end those two partnerships proved to be the difference between the two sides, right? Because conditions weren't very easy on day 4. The ball was spitting off the pitch as well, so sorry, day 3 and 4. And I thought they did well to put together those partnerships and take the kind of ownership and lead. So I that was very encouraging to see, because you want to see those guys stand up, right? They've played the most number of tests in those conditions, and if anyone is going to have an understanding of how things are going to go in goal, it's got to be those four batters. So it was good to see from them. Of course, we always, like, we want more, we want hundreds, and we want big scores, but in the context of this game, those two were really, really valuable partnerships.
Yeah, I that was one of the things I had as well, was Demuth and Chandi's partnership was basically a game changing one,
Mm.
right? Sri Lanka is kind of able to rest the test back on level terms with that good third morning, and then they carry on and put on that big 150 run partnership. And yes, we would have liked them to get hundreds and expand it even more, but in the context of the game, that was very much a match winning one. And then when wickets fell for DDS and Angelo to come together and hold it together for that last hour and a half of the day, I think that was really crucial to avoid getting skittled out for
Mm.
under 200, right? I think they would have lost the match had that happened. And they kind of hung together and hung tough till the end of the day, and and batted well. I think, as you said, right, we've talked about this. We have a lot of good batters, and I think,
Mm.
but maybe not any great batters just
Yeah.
yet. So what we need to win matches is for all those good batters to contribute. We can't just have a couple one-off scores, but we need them all to bat in partnerships. And even to take us back to the first innings, that the two partnerships, one between Angelo and Kamindu, which was worth about 100, and the one between Kusal and Kamindu, which was, I
Mm.
think, worth about 115 or something like that. That took them from a very sort of precarious place
Yeah.
early in the test out of trouble. So, if you're not going to get those big hundreds, the next best thing you can do is big partnerships
Mm.
that keep that game taking over, that take momentum away from the opposition. So I think if you're not going to get hundreds, that's what you got to do, is you got to put together those big partnerships.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. I think that's a good first one. My second good thing is Prabath Jayasuriya. I
Mm.
think when we saw him on the second day of the test, he looked a little bit off. But as he played more and more, he clearly found his groove, and he ended up taking 5 wickets in the second innings, getting that crucial wicket of Rachin Ravindra early this morning, which I think was huge. And he was using his crease. He was bowling very, very smartly. And I think one of the questions that we've had as a group and that I think a lot of people have been thinking about is just how good is Prabath? Is
Mm.
he, one of the best spinners that Sri Lanka have had in recent history? Is he someone who just performs at Galle? And I pulled a couple numbers quickly. So Prabath has played 7 matches at Galle and taken
Mm.
62 wickets. So he's averaging nearly 9 wickets per match. And that is brilliant at an average of 22, an economy of 2.87. And he's taken 2 10 wicket hauls and 7 5 wicket hauls. So that's in 7 matches. To put that in perspective, Murali played 15 matches and took 111 wickets at Galle. So that's about 7.5 a test, at an average of 18.5, which is just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And an economy of 2.15. He took 4 10 furs and 11 5 furs. But the fact that you can even make the comparison, like that there's
Mm.
a
Yeah.
comparison to be made, I think speaks a lot for Prabath. And when we compare it to Rangana Herath, I actually think it's a little bit favorable. So Rangana Herath bowled 19 matches there and took 102 wickets, so about 5 6 per match at an average of 24.9. He had 3 10 wicket hauls and 9 5 wicket hauls. So what Prabath has done over the last few years, particularly at Galle, has been really impressive. And he spun them now to a number of victories. He was man of the match here, but we all remember what he did against Australia in
Mm.
his first test match where he took 12 wickets and then followed it up against Pakistan. And he's been someone that they can really, really count on in those home conditions at Galle. We'll talk a little bit. I think we'll talk a little bit more about the spin attack
Yeah.
later. But I think Prabath definitely deserves praise for how he's been doing, and particularly today, sort of this test match where he didn't start great, but he finished really strong, and he made it so that we could defend that 275. I think we were talking in our WhatsApp group that you might need 350 to
Mm.
defend this, and Prabath made sure that it was defendable, even if it was 275.
Yeah, he kind of returned to the Prabhat we know on day
Hmm.
five, 4 and 5, right? Like
Yeah,
he looked out of sorts in that first innings, and that was the reason I thought that New Zealand managed to get away with things a little bit early on in their innings, particularly Williamson, right? Because he was attacking the spinners. But
yeah.
once Prabhat was able to kind of get a hold of what was going on and really find his lengths and lines, I thought he was really good with the ball. The pitch also had something in it by day 4, you have to
Yeah.
say, right? So that was really encouraging to see. I know for me, I think, you know a lot of people will talk about how he's only performing well in Galle where the conditions are so favorable to spinners. But I thought even England he was quite promising in that his role changes. He's not your wicket taking bowler when you're playing in England, right? He's a guy who plugs things up from one end, and I thought he did it quite well, to an extent in the 2 tests that he played.
Mhm.
But here he had to kind of switch back to his attacking role, and maybe that was the reason why he kind of found it a bit difficult to get
Mhm.
going in the first innings. But a massive positive again, and every win counts, right? You mentioned Sri Lanka is at number 3 now, and
Yeah.
however far fetched that idea is that they will end up in the top 2 in the World Test Championship, every win counts, and winning at home in particular is it's an absolute must, right? If you want to have a chance at that final. So, and he's been basically the man, giving Sri Lanka that chance in every series. So it was really good to see. Okay, so I will go with the third one then. Everyone's least favorite batter, Kusal Mendis, getting runs at number 7. Um, yes, I know there'll be some people who will be questioning why he was given another opportunity, and he's been given so many chances. He's been protected to a degree by him being pushed down to number 7, but I think if you look at the team combination, there was pretty much no choice in this game, right? With Chandimal unable to keep wickets,
Hmm.
you had to go to him for the gloves because Sadira Samaravikrama has not been in touch either, right? He hasn't gotten
Hmm.
runs in Test cricket in his last couple of games either. So I thought that was a good decision. And as Nick, I think a lot of credit should go to Nick. He's the one who's been calling this for a
Yeah.
while, right? That Kusal Mendis should be batting at 7. Um, it meant that Sri Lanka got runs from their number 7. They also got runs from the guy who used to bat at number 7,
Yeah.
Kamindu. And they also got runs from the guy who used to bat at number 5, Dinesh Chandimal, who came in at 3. So um, I think maybe we will discuss Chandimal and him moving up the order also later on. But I think just the fact that that one move of Kusal to number 7 meant that instead of getting runs from 2 players, we got runs from 3 players, right? Because he
Mm.
was basically a walking wicket at number 3 um,
Yeah.
in the England series. So I think that, and you can't understand how important that knock was. He was aggressive, and I thought he was able to handle the pace Oruk was bowling with as well, because he has the experience facing the
Yeah.
fastest bowlers at the top of the order, right? So it's not something that is kind of alien to him, because you like we did see a couple of middle order batters. I thought Angelo found it very tough
Mhm.
when the pace was at a high level. But Kusal seemed a lot more comfortable against it. So, I mean, it's too early to call for sure, but it could be the start of like 2.0, Kusal Bendis
Mm.
2.0 in Test cricket.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the pace thing is fascinating because I think it's movement, right? That's always
Mm.
been his issue, right? He plays well against pace in the white ball game where there's less movement. So when he comes in later on, right, and the ball isn't doing as much, he feels comfortable. I think also you saw a lot of just pressure off of him. He could
Yeah.
play his game freely. Um, it's kind of funny the two ways he got out were both extremely unlucky, right? He whacks it off of short leg and it gets caught by short mid wicket, and then he leaves the ball that's
Mm.
outside the off stump and it bounces unexpectedly, hits his elbow and ricochets off the stump. But even that second innings, I think he played a crucial role because I think DDS came out wanting to smash the
Mm.
bowlers around to get some quick runs, and he couldn't. And Angelo was the exact opposite, where he was kind of trying to soak up the pressure. And Kusal got 25 runs quickly on the board because we didn't get anything from number 9 through
Yeah.
12,
Yeah.
through 12, 8 through 11, sorry. And that was key just to get the boundaries to
Mm.
tick over the scoreboard I think he looks a lot more confident when he's sweeping now.
Mm.
He's um, in the subcontinent, he's one of the best players of spin that we have. And, down at 7, he's going to be using that skill all the time.
Yeah.
Um, One other thing I'll add, his wicket keeping.
Mm.
Actually, I think that was an underrated part of it. He basically, I give him credit, a lot of credit for getting Williamson out. That
Mm.
first catch that he made to
Yeah.
take Williamson was an absolute stunner. And then the stumping he did to get Williamson in the second innings
Mm.
also was a brilliant piece of glove work. We've seen plenty of Sri Lankan keepers miss that stumping
Yeah.
before,
Yeah.
but and if you can affect it against a player like Williamson, that's a huge plus. And I think the thing that you also have to think about is Dinesh Chandimal's long term future, like having
Mm.
him continue to keep wickets with a bad back at the age of 34, 35. That just doesn't seem like a smart
Yeah.
prospect
Exactly.
going forward, right? Okay, fourth good thing. DDS's captaincy on day 4 and 5
Mm.
is my fourth good thing. We talked a little bit about this on our WhatsApp chat. The decision not to continue bowling for an
Yeah.
extra half an hour
Mm.
was really, really a good one. I think it's very tempting. You're thinking, okay, they only need 68 runs. Let's just finish them off. Prabath, you finish them off. You're bowling well. But he knew that it would be easier to remove Ravindra first thing in the morning than it would be late at night, right? And you don't want to leak 20 runs sort of by
Yeah.
accident trying to get that wicket, and rather take things and attack them afresh. It was clear that he had a plan to coming in. So he bowled. He was the first one to bowl. He took the ball, right? And he had mentioned, I think, in his interview that Ramesh had been a little bit offline, and he wanted to
Mm.
start on the tight line and make sure that um, they didn't let Ravinder get going. So he ended up taking the ball. So I think as a captain, that's a big step forward to say, okay, how are we going to approach this? I'm going to take the ball. I'm going to take responsibility, and I'm going to make a difference there, right? And I think it brings up the question of how much he's been bowling himself. I think
Yeah.
previously he's been a little scared to, but this match, he realized that he can be a real difference maker with the ball, particularly against a left-handed lineup. I liked the fact that they were always keeping pressure on the New Zealanders, even when it seemed like, okay, they're about to get away. He knew that there was a wicket around the corner. He was um, always trying to be attacking. And I think that's something we saw as a little bit of a weakness um, in the England series, is sometimes he goes into a more defensive mode. But I think he's starting to find his voice, like to be able to say, Ramesh wasn't hitting his lines and lengths that we wanted, so let's change up our plan. So that for
Yeah.
me was a good thing, seeing him kind of develop his own voice as a test captain.
Yet the decision not to continue bowling was like the complete opposite of them bowling spin in that England test, right? When they could have gone
Yeah,
off and given the new ball to their fast bowlers the next morning. They decided, was it? It was the first test, wasn't it?
yeah. They
They
decided to
decided to
bowl with the new
bowl
ball.
spin and it went for runs, right? So
Yeah,
this was like the opposite. And I think people were critical because, like you said, it's very easy to think in that situation, look, it's two wickets. You don't need to get Rachin. You get Ajaz Patel and then
Mhm.
Willow and the game is done. But as you rightly said, the batter is also going to have to settle back in, right? When they come in the next day, and it worked perfectly because what New Zealand lasted like 3.5 overs or something in the
Yeah,
morning, right? So, yeah, I think you're right. I think it's you can see that there's kind of a development in how he's thinking. Um, it's interesting to see how a captain would grow in a situation like this as well, because like he's played a lot of cricket and he's
yeah,
played under Dimuth a lot, right? So it's not like he's coming from outside and now he's trying to establish a different sort of leadership. He would definitely have the influence of Dimuth on his game as well. So it's
right.
interesting to see how that develops. I think as a player himself, he's a lot more aggressive than Dimuth. So that
Yeah,
that possibly comes out in his captaincy as well. And I think another important point is him being able to give leadership in his own way as opposed to a strong leader like Sanath, right? Sanath
yeah,
Jasuri is a very strong leader in that what he says goes usually. So when you are playing under a coach like that, as a player or as a captain, you also need to be strong in your conviction and what you want to do, because you might not always align with what the coach thinks is
yeah,
the correct thing to do, right? So yeah, I'm still, it's very easy to say good things, I think, when you win.
yeah,
So we'll still be on watch on Dhananjay, but there have been good things, definitely, as you
yeah.
mentioned.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree that not out of the woods yet, but
Yeah.
starting to see some good things. Yeah.
Okay, so the last one, I'm going to go with Dinesh Chandimal. I think I mentioned this in the previous pod as well. Is that like some of the criticism we've had is that he's not been keeping, but he's batting in a safe position at number five, right, or
Mhm.
relatively safe position at number five. But with him unable to keep, agreeing to go move up the order and bat at three after many years, I think was a brave decision. Or you know,
Mhm.
it it wouldn't have been. He would have been very comfortable at five, right? He would have thought it would be easier to bat there, but
Yeah.
he was willing to take that challenge. I don't know under what under what conditions or whatever, but and he did a good job. Like I mentioned before when I spoke about the seniors getting runs, the fact that we finally were able to get runs out of our number three player meant
Mhm.
that there was a lot more stability in the side, and for other batters to bat around him as well, because you you know that there's a guy who is steady and comfortable out there and who's willing to kind of grind things out at number three. So I thought that was a big positive for Sri
Mm,
Lanka, at least for the foreseeable future, right? Dinesh
yeah,
Chandimal is probably not going to play another 5 to 6 years,
yeah,
but at least until the end of this cycle,
mm,
if he's not keeping and Kusal Mendis continues to make runs and keep well, then they don't have to really worry about that number three spot, which has been a headache for a while, right? So
yeah,
I thought that performance was really important, not just for this game, but giving the team the belief and the batting unit, especially that belief that, okay, that's not a walking wicket. It's not, you lose a early wicket doesn't mean you're going to lose two. You you will have some fight from that number three batter. And yeah, because I was critical of him, I thought you have to acknowledge that it was brave of him to come out and take that
yeah.
challenge on.
I 100% agree. And I think just two small things I would add to what you said, which I completely agree with, is I think it signals a new era in this test team because I
Mm,
would say before this, a lot of players were playing individually. They were playing to score runs, so they stayed in the team because they'd all been dropped. They've all been chopped and changed so
mm,
many times. So they were saying, okay, I want to bat where I'm most comfortable because I'm going to get my runs, and that means I'll stay in the team and I'll be able to get more personal accomplishments. But Chandi moving up to three shows me that this isn't a position he's really batted very much during his career.
mm.
He's played a few matches there, but it says, okay, I see the job the team needs me to do. I'm willing to soak up the pressure and bat through it. And that's what you want from your seniors, to
Yeah.
go up the order, to take on those harder positions and get something out of them, right? The other thing, and I think you're right, Estelle, you mentioned this with Kusal Mendis going from two scorers to three is huge, but also it protects Kamindu, I think.
Mm,
The fact that Chandimal, if he continues to be successful at three, will allow Kamindu to bat at five and kind of
yeah.
continue that there. Because I think a lot of people were thinking, oh, they're just going to switch Kamindu and
Mm,
Kusal and have them Kamindu bat at three. But I think it allows Kamindu to continue doing the excellent things he's
yeah.
done. Right. And we saw what he could do from number five in that first innings, right? A brilliant 100. And you look at the batting lineup up and down and you feel comfortable. You feel like you have contributors at every single spot. Okay, great. So let's move on to the bad things, right? Because it's a Sri Lankan cricket podcast. If we're not saying something bad about what's going on, then what are we really doing here? Okay, so I'll start off. My first bad thing is Sri Lanka's off spinning stocks.
Mm,
Um, I think it speaks volumes that someone like Ramesh Mendis was not given the
yeah.
ball this morning, right? That Dhananjaya De Silva, who we know is a somewhat reluctant bowler, thought, I'm more likely to hit a line and a length than my top off spinner is, right? And there can be no doubt as to Ramesh Mendis's talent. He's capable of getting tremendous spin from the
Mm.
track. We saw that in a couple of his dismissals. I forget. I think maybe it was Daryl Mitchell who he
Darren
bowled,
Mitchell. Yeah, yeah.
and that spun a huge way.
Mm,
But the inability to consistently land it on a line and a length, right, to consistently trouble the batter, right. We all talk about how Murali spun the ball a mile, but if you ask him what his number one trait was, it was his accuracy, that he
yeah.
could land the ball where he wanted to, whenever he wanted to, right? And that's something that Ramesh Mendis, despite like all the support he's had, right? Because he's been in the team for 3-4 years now,
Mm,
has not quite yet figured out. And okay, we can't put it all on Ramesh Mendis, right? But the Sri Lankan off spin stocks are very, very thin. Um, they brought in Nishan Pires as a backup for Vishwa Fernando. But aside from Pires, I can't really think of an off spinner who Sri Lanka will want to play in tests in the near future. They have a lot of left arm spin.
mm,
They have wrist spinners. But as far as an off spinner goes, which is crucial, right, especially against a team like New Zealand where they
yeah.
have a ton of left-handed bats, it's really a problem. And if you're going to continue playing at Galle, it puts a lot of pressure on someone like Prabath Jayasuriya to just eat overs and stick at an end rather than being rotated in and out and coming in fresh with new plans and approaches. He kind of has to hold up one end for the entirety of an
Yeah.
innings. And that's a lot of pressure. So, or, say he's bowling well and then Ramesh is bowling balls that are hit me balls, right? Releases all the pressure and changes up the part of the game. And I think that game drifting is something that we've seen, right? Like, okay, our plan is to bowl spin, but if one of your spinners isn't bowling well, then the game can drift from you really, really quickly.
No, I completely agree. I think that is the major concern for Sri Lanka. And it's been a long-standing one because Ramesh Mendis has been struggling, as you mentioned, to I think find any kind of consistency with his action. That's the only thing I
Mm-hmm.
can think of for the reason that he's struggling because he started off so well, right? And we saw the impact he could have as a bowler. But I will say, like when you mentioned about Dhananjay De Silva talking about wanting basically saying that he doesn't trust him enough to give him
Yeah.
the ball, right? Ramesh Mendis has been thrown under the bus many, many, many times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I wonder what that does to his confidence as well. Because it
Absolutely.
can't be easy hearing something like that from your captain at a press conference, right? A couple of I don't know how long ago it was, the spin bowling coach also was critical of him at a press
Mm-hmm.
conference, right? And there's this idea that you can't trust Ramesh Mendis. And us talking about it is one thing, but
Yeah.
his own people from his own dressing room coming out and saying it to the public is another thing altogether, right? I mean, people are going to say that's the nature of the sport, and I understand, and I agree with it, but it can't be easy from his point of view as well because I mean, you're playing as a spinner, and you're
Yeah.
basically being told that the part-time spinner is going to get the ball ahead of you because they don't trust you to land the ball, right? And the truth is, Dhananjay did bowl better than him in most
Yeah.
of those spells, right? So it really begs the question then why they are persisting with Ramesh Mendis. It's possible it's because there aren't that many off spinning options as you mentioned before, and I think if this wasn't New Zealand, they may have been tempted to go with Van der Sar, right?
Yeah.
Especially like considering the fact that New Zealand have a lot of left-handers. That's where you kind of want an off spinner
Yeah.
in your side. um, but yeah, it's really it's very difficult to fathom what the thinking is because it's not just Dimut. Sorry, Dhananjay. Even Dimut has expressed in the past kind of
Mm.
doubts about Ramesh Mendis, right? And it's not a slight on his talent. Everybody knows how he can switch. Like once he starts getting things going,
Yeah.
he's very difficult to play because, as you mentioned, he does get a lot of spin for a finger spinner, and he because of his height and the way his action follows through, he does get that extra bounce, and he can extract like that extra bounce from a dead pitch like goal. So it's very interesting to me how the decision to play him is being made when then midway through the test you're saying, look, we don't know whether we want to give him the ball because he's been kind of wavered. So I think that would have been my number one bad thing as well because it's getting concerning now, right? Because
Yeah.
you don't have that many orthodox spinning options lined up. Okay, so my one is I will go with the tails batting.
I had this one
They are
too.
basically contributing nothing,
Mm.
which is again, I know it's the batter's responsibility to get the runs, and I agree with it. But you need to have at least a couple of players who can stick around. Well, to go back to Ramesh Mendis, I think one of the main reasons that he does get picked is that he can bat. But particularly over the last couple of series, he hasn't really been able to stick around long enough to kind of support the other batter on the other side, right? And that it's becoming an issue where basically, if you get 7 wickets, 8, 9, 10 is just going to roll over. And if you look at both Sri Lanka's innings, 20 to 30 runs in both innings would have made a massive
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they were able to get over the line, but those 30 to 40 runs could have been the difference between a win and a loss. So, I think that's something that you have to also hammer into the
Mhm.
bowlers. Even if you're not making a lot of runs, you need to be trying to stick around at least so that you can make the most of things and give yourselves ultimately a chance, right?
Yeah, I had that as a key thing because they got 28 runs across the 8 times that the bottom order batted, and that's an average of 3.5, right? Like, and as you said, we're not asking them to give us 100
Yeah.
runs from those last four, right? We're asking for them to give us like 30 runs from the
10
last four.
each. 10
Yeah,
each.
10 each. Yeah, seven each. I'll take seven each, right? And I think one of the things that's interesting is, right, Ramesh Mendis, again, not to be harsh on him, but I saw on Twitter someone posting, oh, Ramesh Mendis has a higher first class average than Kusal Mendis does. He has a triple hundred and all that stuff. And, I think if he's in the team to bat, that he's got to be putting in at least 10, 15
Mm,
runs. And, because it does make a big difference. I think it's an area where our players can improve. We've seen some bad batters make themselves into,
yeah.
I don't know.
I don't think, the thing is, I don't think any of them are bad batters, right? Prabath
No,
is bad. Asita is the regular tail ender. Even Lahiru Kumara can bat.
can hit. He can
Yeah.
hit. He scored useful runs in matches before. And even Asita isn't
Mm.
like, he's better than, say, a
He's
Nuwan
not a Nuwan
Tushar.
Pradeep.
Yeah, or yeah. And even Pradeep, right, by the end of his career became much
Yeah, he
better.
did. He did. Yeah.
And I think that's going to be key, especially when we're not getting those big hundreds,
Mm,
right? We're ending up like around 300 for six, and then can we stretch it to that 350, 360, where we can kind of be foot in front at the end of an innings, as opposed to just kind of
mm.
meekly going out.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think that's something that they've got to figure out how to do, whether it's just even someone like Rangana Herath, right? Like, we all remember the
Oh,
fun that
yeah.
he had watching him bat. So, like, if you can't defend, well, just go for your shots in
Mm.
that case, right? And if you get out, there's nothing we can do to blame you, but at least try to score. There's got to be some
Yeah.
intent to score. So this actually kind of dovetails really well with my second bad
Mm.
point, or our third bad point overall. Um, their bowling lineup and how it's structured, right? So they played two fast bowlers and
Mm.
two spin bowlers, right? With Dunn maybe kind of becoming an all rounder
Yeah.
halfway through the
Yeah.
match. But Asita and Lahira Kumara bowled a total of 4 overs um, in the second innings, right? So that's basically a waste of a spot, right? You might as well play with one fast bowler and put in another spin option, right? Or bring in someone who can bat, right? Bring in someone. Obviously, he's not on the side, but someone like Chamika Karunaratne at 8, so that he can bat a little bit and get you some runs. But I think playing those two fast bowlers, if you don't have a specific plan as to how to use them, is a bit of a problem. And I think um, that's something I'd like to see them come into with more plans about. Like, I think
Mm.
the second day when they came in, they didn't really have an idea of how they should be using these two fast bowlers at home. Asita only bowled 7 overs, I think, and you'd
Mm.
like for him to bowl more if he's going to be in the side. And it kind of was like, okay, let's just toss the ball to Prabath and have him operate from one end,
It
and
was
then
basically that obligatory, like you give the new ball to the quicks,
yeah,
and then like 2 3 overs later, you just throw the ball to the spinners, right?
exactly, exactly. And then they got the new ball that second innings, or sorry, the first innings, the second part of the first innings, and they gave it to Kamindu Mendis. They gave
Oh,
it to, I think, Lahira Kumara and Kamindu Mendis. So I think you've just got to be a little bit more thoughtful
Mm,
in terms of how you deploy things. I think this is where the lack of a pace bowling all rounder might hurt you, right? Because then you don't feel necessarily like you're taking up a spot because they might be giving you batting cover,
mm.
or something of that nature. And I think it'll be interesting, and we'll talk about when we do the preview for the second test, whether it's a possibility that they play three spinners, whether they bring in someone like Van der Say. I don't know what they're planning on doing in terms of the pitch, whether they're planning on, using a similar strip or what it'll look like. But I think there are a lot of questions about how they want to set up their bowling lineup and how they want to deploy them in a way that gets the most out of it. Because I think there was some good thought in saying, okay, let's get two fast bowlers who have bowled really well, but you've
Yeah.
got to have a good plan for how you're going to use them at Galle.
Yeah, I was very surprised, and I think we touched on this in the previous pod as well, right? I was surprised that that's all Asita bowled, because Asita is a guy who can bowl in all phases. He's got the
Mm-hmm.
skill to get the ball reversing. He does move the ball, move the new ball as well. And in
Mm-hmm.
the second innings, he did get a wicket, and then he was taken off after 2 overs, right? So I was very surprised in the way Asita was used. I was wondering, to be honest, whether it had something to do with kind of managing him a bit, because he's
Mm-hmm.
been playing a lot of cricket. He's been in the limited over sides as well. He's played the LPL full season, and the tests in England, so he can't be feeling that kind of good, right? He probably is a bit sore. So I did wonder whether that was the reason why they used him like that. But in that case, it probably would have made more sense to just rest him in the first test and
Yeah.
play somebody else, right? Yeah, yeah. If that's how you're going to utilize them, as you mentioned, you might as well have the three spinners. My only
Mm-hmm.
problem is that we are struggling to find a number two spinner, so
Yeah.
the picking a number three is going to probably be even tougher. I actually wonder if Nishan Piris might just be stuck straight into the 11 instead of
Mm-hmm.
Ramesh. It would be an interesting pick, because as we discussed before, Ramesh um, struggled a bit in patches, and obviously doesn't really have the confidence of his captain, right? So I wonder if it's an opportunity to maybe blood somebody else and see how things go. Um, I said it before the first test as well. I would have picked Van der Say even with the left-handers, because we haven't seen him in red ball cricket, like in Test cricket, right? So you can't make a judgment that, oh, he's not going to be good when you haven't seen him in red ball cricket. I think he does have the skills to be successful with the red ball, but he just hasn't gotten the opportunities, and the opportunities he's got with the white ball is done well. So it's very easy to kind of pigeonhole him as like this white ball cricketer. So I think that's one area definitely they'll be thinking about. Um, the next bad thing, and it's kind of related to number one good thing I pointed out about the partnerships. The partnerships were great, but I think once again you have to think about, why aren't they converting?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that's going wrong that um, the senior batters are not able to kick on after basically doing all the hard work, right? um, I have I Dimut in the second innings probably could have gone on to make 100, but I thought his dismissal was something that you can't really blame him, because he'd been playing the sweep really well
Mm-hmm.
and then just underaged one, right?
Yeah.
I thought Dhananjay De Silva's dismissal was very disappointing, because it felt like he was trying to hit everything out of the park, right? And Ajas Patel was bowling really well in on was it the fourth day morning? Yeah,
Yeah.
Ajas was bowling really well, and I remember we discussed in the previous pod how if Sri Lanka had managed to kind of not lose wickets in the first 10 overs of day four,
Yeah.
Angelo and Dhananjay are probably going to be able to build a substantial lead. I think knowing that, the way he played was probably, I mean, in my opinion at least, a bit uncalled for, because he
Yeah,
it felt like like I said, he was chasing everything, right? Whether that's because they had decided that Angelo would be kind of the anchor and Dhananjaya would go after the bowling, it's possible, right? And if we've noticed anything over the last four tests, is that they do seem to be playing a lot more attacking
yeah,
with the bat. They are a bit more aggressive. Um, Possibly take. I mean, we have to say it's because of Ben Duckett, right? Ben Duckett's
yeah.
aggressive intent is what's watered down to everybody else. I'm joking, guys. I don't mean that. Um, but they have been more aggressive, so maybe that was the reason. But I just felt like it just gave New Zealand a kind of a foot in the door again, right? When they had batted so well and put on a good partnership.
Yeah, I think, you asked the question, what's the rush there, right? Fourth morning, right? You can very safely bat out two sessions without having to worry
Mm.
about, you know, um, anything like run rate or what the scoring rate is. And also, given the frailty of that 8 through 11 that we've been talking about, right? You've basically got one man standing between you and the tail, right?
Yeah.
Where everything can kind of go amiss. So that was surprising. And I agree with you. Um, these two scores that were low 300s could have easily been 350
Mm.
plus with a little bit of application, right? That willingness to kick on. I think we praised Dinesh Chandimal. The downside for me is, getting out to like slip.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
is something that that's a mental thing. I think they have to find that right balance between attack and a defense. I think at Gaul they feel maybe a little bit more aggressive because they feel as if they know the conditions
Mm.
and when to attack and when to defend. And maybe the fourth morning, in DDS was thinking, okay, I'm going to get a ball with my name on
Mm.
it sooner or later. Let's just make runs. But I think the way you approach it is what we saw someone like, I think Kamindu and Rachin were the two people who've
Yeah.
batted best on this pitch. And they had this sort of excellent mix of attack and defense. And they both played beautifully. And I think those hundreds, like if we're really going to go from being like a decent test team to a good one, that's for me the next leap that we need to
Yeah.
take is making those scores 50, 60, 100 runs more. And then we'll put a lot more pressure. And then someone like Ramesh Mendis also feels less pressure to
Yeah.
kind of keep things tight and things of that nature. All right. Um, the last thing that I have, the last bad thing. It's not really a bad thing. I was racking my brain for
Mhm.
anything good, but I think it sets up the possibility for heartbreak. Is my last thing. We've played very well over the last kind of 2 months. I think we're seeing the team mature. Think we're seeing, a lot of people contribute, right? Like basically, aside from the two fast bowlers and Potham, who had an off day with the bat, everyone chipped in, right? Which
Mm.
is a really good thing. And now everyone's kind of looking and thinking, all right, if they win four of their next five, right, they've got three of those matches at home. They can make it to that World Test Championship. And I think one of the axioms of Sri Lanka cricket is when you expect the team to play well and build off of good wins, they don't.
Yeah.
And vice versa, when you expect them to play like complete garbage, they end up
Mm.
somehow pulling the rabbit out of the hat. So that's kind of my bad thing is that it seems like we've kind of crested here. Now it's going to be really important. I'm not saying it's inevitable, but it's going
Yeah.
to be really important for them to not rest on their laurels because I think that kind of happened in that first test at the where was it? Not at the Oval, at in Manchester, right?
Manchester.
Where they thought, oh, we did really well,
Mm.
and I think Dinesh Chandimal came out and said something like, "Yeah, we were very happy with that performance." And instead of saying, "Okay, well, what can we do better to make that loss into a victory?"
Win. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where they missed out. So I think what they should be thinking here is, okay, we played pretty well, but there's still areas where we can improve. So can they develop that winning mentality that you see from the best teams in the world, where they're never satisfied, where
Mhm.
the players who didn't contribute last match will be spurred on to do more in the next one. So that's what I'm interested to see. It's less of a bad point and more of a, if we are to build towards a better team in the future, this is what they need to do.
I completely agree with you. I think, as you mentioned, that when you think they've sorted themselves out and they should win something or they should do well in one of the games, that's inevitably where you see some kind of disaster happen. Like, if you look back at this World Test Championship, right, Sri Lanka sitting number 3 at the moment, you have to wonder what would have happened if they'd beaten Pakistan has been terrible in
Terrible.
this World Test Championship,
Yeah.
and yet of all teams Sri Lanka lost 2-0 to them at home, right? And in conditions which they never should have served up, flat tracks that you did nothing with the ball. Um,
Yep.
so, y- uh, I mean, people are going to say that we're being negative, but 4 out of 5 wins against South Africa and Australia is not going to be easy, right? Even
Mm,
New Zealand, I thought they had the opportunities to win this game and they
absolutely.
blew it as well, right? Like, they should have got a much bigger lead in that first innings.
Hmm.
Coming into day 3 on 255 for 4, I believe, they should have at least got to 400. They would have had a massive lead, right? And
Hmm.
then when a couple of times they had Sri Lanka under the pump with the ball, they just weren't able to close things off. So they
Yep.
had the opportunities as well. And if they come good in the next test, it's going to be tough, because if you look at New Zealand, right, they have the players who can succeed in these conditions.
Yep.
And it's
Hmm.
not like 10 years ago, where the only experience they have of these conditions is when they come for a test series. That's not the case anymore, right? Like, you've got, I know it's, when I say the IPL, people are going to be like, that's just T20 cricket, but they spend couple of months at the IPL, and that's not all just playing T20 cricket, right? They spend a lot of time in the nets. They spend a lot of time trying to understand the conditions. So when you do that, you're automatically going to develop skills that will help you in subcontinental conditions, right? So
Absolutely.
if you look at the lineup, you've got Devon Conway, you've got Glenn Phillips, obviously, Rachin, Kane Williamson, it goes without saying. You've got the players who can make a
Mm.
big contribution and win you a game. Even on the bowling front, Uruk was incredible. I honestly
Right.
would not have seen him starting this game. I thought it would be Matt Henry, because he's been so consistently good, right? And obviously they can't drop Saudi because he's captain. But he was
Mm.
really, really good with the ball. Ajas Patel was really good, I thought, on day 4. Um, and then, again, for them, that second spinner is the one who kind of let them down, right? Santner
Hmm.
didn't have the game that you would have expected him to
Yeah.
have. So they had their chances as well. So it's not like it's a given that we will win the next test and we will beat Australia 2-0, and then we just need to get one win against South Africa. that's
Yeah.
that's not how things work. But on the positive side of things, I think it's absolutely great that for 2 cycles consecutively, Sri Lanka have been in the running for making that
Yep.
final, right until like 75% or 80% of the cycle is done, right? So I think it's
No.
a massive achievement, because people don't really rate Sri Lanka as a test side. Um, they're not in the conversation when you're talking
No.
about who's making that final, right? But they've managed to just keep themselves in the running even last season, last cycle. So that's the big positive I see.
Yeah, and I think like if we look at the rankings, they're now ranked sixth, I believe, in the test rankings, right? Which is the highest they've been in some
Mm.
time, right? And it'll be interesting. It's very positive, I think, what we've seen. Um, just looking at the scorecard, one thing I realized was that New Zealand's tailenders did not bat well, and I would have
Mm.
expected the likes of
Yeah,
Santner and Southey to, because they
yeah.
both batted very well against us before. I
Mm.
remember actually that first test we lost in New Zealand, we had them on the ropes, and then Southey just
Yeah.
started smashing
Mm.
sixes everywhere. So that's
I
a
thought
that is
even
a
I thought even Uruk looked good with the bat,
yeah,
although he batted at 11 below Ajas Patel. He
yeah.
did look like he could bat.
they actually had fewer runs than we did, which tells
Mm,
you how bad their
yeah.
lower order was because we were
And they
just
have better, like
much
much,
better.
much
Yeah.
better batters in
Like
that
it's
lower
not even
order.
close,
Mm.
right? Like Mitch Santner compared to
Ramesh.
Ramesh or Tim Southey compared to Prabath, right?
Mm.
Like those are, I'm sure they, let's see, Southey definitely has a test 50. Let's see. Yeah, Southey has 650s in tests, and Mitch Santner has 100 in
Mm.
250s in tests. So, like, it's not even really a comparison. So, those are things that we might expect to revert to the mean
Yeah.
next match. So, I think we've covered just about
Yep.
everything from this match. So if you've been listening, give us a like, subscribe, comment, and we will be back with you in a couple of days to preview that second test. All right. Thank you. Bye.